public speaker, so hold on. My name is Ruth Ashcraft. I'm a 37-year survivor of uterine cancer. And this is my third year of relay. I relay today for the strongest man I know, my husband, Andy Ashcraft. This is going to be a story about our trials. On May 13th, 2010, our lives were turned upside down from a diagnosis of stage 4 pleural mesothelioma. It has affected his left lung lining, stomach, and diaphragm. It truly was the worst day of our lives. We were given a pretty negative and grim prognosis. We were told to get our affairs in order because the average life expectancy was 3 months to 2 years. Well, anyone that knows us knows that one thing we aren't is average. We're not willing to accept the diagnosis, and neither were Andy's kids. Sean is Andy's oldest son, and he immediately started researching for doctors. He found a Dr. Jablons at UC San Francisco. He's the top mesothelioma specialist on the West Coast. In July 2010, we were able to get an appointment with Dr. Jablons. Andy and I drove to San Francisco. We were doing everything in our power to make every minute count. It was like living with a ticking time bomb. Except Andy felt fine. And we had a real hard time thinking this disease was going to take him away from us at any moment. His son Sean flew into San Francisco to meet us for an appointment with Dr. Jablons. It was another life-changing day. Dr. Jablons told us Andy was the healthiest stage 4 mesothelioma patient he had ever seen. He also told us no one can give you a time limit to live.
Amen.
It wasn't up to medicine. It was up to Andy as a patient, and only God himself knows when it's going to be our time.
Amen.
For the first time in months, we felt hope. Dr. Jablons was very excited to get Andy into a second stage of a brand new worldwide trial. My lips are sticking together. For a new drug called MORAb 009. We finally decided to go with UCSD because we needed to be available for infusions every 10 days. For the first 6 months, they were 10 to 12 hours a day. We had an amazing oncologist, Dr. Mitchell at UCSD, and a loving infusion staff that we saw every 10 days for 3.5 years. In late October of 2013, Andy's tummy started filling with fluid, and eventually 12 liters or 3.2 gallons of fluid were drained from his tummy. It was, to say the least, a little scary. It was then that we realized the trial drug had quit working, and we are now back to square one. As it turned out, and you can see, Andy was put back on chemo, and he has made another miraculous recovery. Here with me today to walk his third relay in memory of everyone who has lost their battle to cancer, but specifically to walk to bring awareness to mesothelioma. Our relay team's name this year is No Give Up. This is a name in memory of a great man, Mr. Robert Koga. Also known as Sensei Koga, and the founder of the Koga Institute. I recently learned that Mr. Koga trained the Marietta Police Department right here in police tactics for many years. So he has a connection to Marietta. I encourage you to go to Google Robert Koga and read about his life, battles, and accomplishment. Mr. Koga is also the father of one of our team members, Kelly, and the husband of Susan Koga, who they are both here today. Just 4 short months after he was diagnosed, Mr. Koga lost his battle to mesothelioma in September 2013. That was just 4 short months after he was diagnosed. Just last week, a 28-year-old man named Michael Brady lost his 2-year battle to this insidious disease. All cancers are horrible. We can agree on that. Mesothelioma is one of the very few cancers that should have been totally preventable. Its only known cause is direct exposure to asbestos. Andy knows he was exposed while working in a home improvement store from 1965 to 1985. This was the heyday years for asbestos. It was a selling point for floor and ceiling tiles. It's what held stucco together. It's a heat shield in hair dryers and still is used in many of them. It was used in brakes and on pipes in the Navy ships and many more places we probably will never know. It was everywhere, and it still remains in the older buildings and schools, and I imagine in a lot more places unknown to us. Mesothelioma has a 10 to 60 year latency period. Most people 50 years old and older have been exposed. You see, the big builders and the product makers knew it caused cancer in 1928. But because of all the uses and the low cost of asbestos, they decided not to let us, the lay people or the common public, know they were working with a killer time bomb, and instead used it as a selling point. Mr. Koga couldn't pinpoint where he was exposed because of the things he went through in his lifetime. At the age of 12, he was taken from his family and sent to a Japanese internment camp. He was in the U.S. Air Force and Los Angeles Police Department. He most likely was exposed in all those places. The 28-year-old Michael Bradley I told you about earlier was exposed to fibers from his dad's clothing. So you see, this is why our team is working to bring knowledge about this disease. There are no known blood markers or tests to specifically diagnose mesothelioma, and there is no cure. It is always terminal. So please stop by our table to read about and pick up information on symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment. Thank you for letting me honor my husband, Andy Ashcraft, and remember Robert Koger, Michael Brady, and all the other mesothelioma warriors.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Ashcraft.